Hello, hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, September 6th, 2023, in the United Corporations of America, as Jordan always likes to remind us. We've got a great show coming up today. We're going to cover all sorts of different stories. We're going to start it off, though, with the latest on Trump having a first real serious lawsuit as far as having ballot access in the state of Colorado. We're going to look at that specific instance in Colorado, as well as the potential for this to be happening not only in Colorado, but in other states across the country. Obviously, that could lead to some real chaos when it comes to the timing of this, as people are now just starting to states now are getting into the phase of needing to finalize ballots for the Republican primary coming up soon, and a lot of these lawsuits and whatnot are going to be going on while people are literally casting votes. So we'll get into some of the specifics there. We're also going to be joined at 5:30 Eastern Time, so in about a half an hour, by the one and only Tina-Desiree Berg. Tina has been on the ground in Atlanta, I believe twice at this point, covering the Cop City going on there. She's covered some protests there, as well as some other actions going on. So there's some new reporting coming out today. We're going to talk to Tina about that and get an update on what's going on in Atlanta, because frankly, some people are being charged with some absolutely ridiculous levels of crimes that have basically nothing to do with what has actually been going on here. The state of Georgia really escalating this purely because they can, it seems. But I'm excited to talk to Tina about the specifics there. And we're also at some point going to give an update as well on a little bit more that I found last week. If you were here joining us, we talked a lot about the geriatrics who are in charge of this country. Some fun reporting actually came out over the weekend on this. We also have a little bit of an update from Mitch McConnell on, what exactly happened last week when he lights out froze. Again, it's the second time this had happened to him in about a month and a half. Obviously, like I said last week, we don't like to see folks, not doing well health-wise, especially as they're getting older, but it's a whole other thing when you are a public official who is representing literally millions and millions of people. And in Mitch McConnell's case, he is literally the Senate leader on the Republican side. He is not just a regular senator, although we've got plenty of elderly senators. He has a lot more power behind this. But for those of you just joining right now, please smash the like button down below to help get this stream out to more folks. It makes a huge difference. You've got no idea. That gets it out into the algorithm. Love seeing everybody in the comments as well. I try to keep an eye out on them as we go. But super chats are the one thing that I definitely won't miss. All super chats I will make sure we've read by the end of the show. So with all of that being said, let's get into the latest on these Trump ballot lawsuits. First with an article from ABC News discussing the specific case in Colorado. The headline here: Group sues to block Trump from 2024 ballot in Colorado, citing the 14th Amendment and January 6th. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, a Washington-based watchdog group, on Wednesday filed a lawsuit on behalf of a handful of voters seeking to bar former President Donald Trump from the 2024 ballot in Colorado under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, based on his alleged involvement in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The suit, quickly dismissed by the Trump team, marks one of the first serious challenges to his qualifications as presidential candidate based on a 14th Amendment argument. Section 3 states that somebody isn't eligible for future office if, while they were previously in office, they took an oath to support the Constitution, but then, quote, engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, or gave aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, unless they are granted amnesty by a 2/3 vote of Congress. Obviously, a 2/3 vote of Congress would not happen. Supporters of this theory argue this applies to Trump because of his conduct after he lost the 2020 election, but sought to reverse the results. Previous such efforts, focused on other Republicans, have failed, but Crew last year successfully pushed to remove a county official in New Mexico who was convicted of trespassing in connection with the attack on the Capitol. Wednesday's suit against Trump was filed with Cruz attorneys by 6 Republicans and unaffiliated Colorado voters, including former state, federal, and local officials. The suit accuses Trump of inciting and aiding the mob that stormed the Capitol 2 years ago. He was previously impeached by the House of Representatives for the same crime, but was acquitted by the Senate and has repeatedly maintained he did not incite the rioters. This article continues to go on here, and obviously this one is brought up in the state of Colorado, which is a big state, just like, for this to be brought up in any state is a big deal here. Again, former President Trump is by far the leading candidate on the Republican side of the primary this year, of the ballot. He's up in many cases by 35 to 40%, in the polls, ahead of Ron DeSantis, ahead of Vivek Ramaswamy, ahead of Nikki Haley, ahead of Chris Christie. I mean, all of those other people that I just mentioned, with the exception of DeSantis and Ramaswamy in a couple polls, are polling in the single digits, where you've got former President Trump literally at 55%. Whether you like the guy or not, whether you think he committed crimes here or not, this is going to be an interesting thing to look at as we get closer to the primary season, where Americans are going to be casting their votes here. And that is something that folks from many of these other states are taking seriously and looking into. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the next article from NBC News, which is kind of discussing this similar stuff here, but not just in the state of Colorado, but what might happen if this begins to happen in other parts of the state. Again, please smash the like button to help get this out to more folks as well. Headline from NBC News: Secretaries of State get ready for possible challenges to Trump's ballot access. Arizona Secretary of State is the latest to say his office is grappling with the potential effects of a move to block Trump from the ballot. Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes said Tuesday that his office is figuring out how to handle potential complaints over whether former President Donald Trump should be disqualified from appearing on the 2024 ballot. The issue centers on the 14th Amendment, which prohibits people who have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion from holding public office. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson raised the theory at last week's GOP presidential debate that Trump's conduct on January 6, 2021 might disqualify him on those grounds. A theory that has gained traction among some legal scholars, though others discount the possibility. Now, the people running state elections are trying to figure out what to do if people bring legal challenges against Trump. Quote, We have to have a final certification of eligible candidates for the primary ballot by December 14th for Arizona's presidential preference election, Fontes, a Democrat elected last year, told NBC News. Quote, and because this will ultimately end up in court, we are taking this very seriously. New Hampshire Secretary of State David Scanlon is dealing with the same question as he watches a potential challenge to Trump brewing in his own state. There, a Republican former Trump ally is considering bringing a 14th Amendment challenge against him. Quote, we need to run an election, Fontes said. We need to know who is eligible and this is of incredible national interest. We aren't taking a position one way or the other. Quote, if there are people who want to fight this out, they need to start swinging because I have an election to run, Fontes added. Scanlon of New Hampshire made the same point Monday, that he is not seeking to remove any names from the presidential primary ballot, but is trying to figure out what to do about potential challenges that are brewing. So obviously, speaking with folks running elections in multiple states, this is going to be a bit of a touchy thing to sort out. I don't know of this happening in the United States before, but it's definitely a little dangerous as far as the timing goes. Again, as this first lawsuit in Colorado is being brought up, the dates to certify who's going to be on the ballot in Colorado are coming up soon. In several of these other states, including New Hampshire, Arizona, and I'm sure dozens more, the ballots need to be certified and who's going to be on them very soon. Even if some of these cases are being figured out as people are voting, this is going to be a bit of a nightmare, and I am not sure how it's going to be handled. It's one of those things where, let's actually take a look at that timeline a little bit here. Colin, I'm going a little out of order. Can you pull up the Time article that has the timelines here. I just want to go through some of these dates because it's a little wild to, when you see it all kind of typed out. So let's just skip down, Colin, to the dates. Let's skip down to where it says September 6th. Because that's today. So September 6th, arraignment in Georgia case. We've got September 27th. He's got the second GOP primary debate. We'll see if President Trump participates in that one. October 2nd, trial in the Trump Organization civil fraud suit. October 23rd, first trial in the Georgia case. January 15th, trial in the E. Jean Carroll civil defamation suit. January 15th, Iowa Republican caucus. Okay, so he's got all these things literally on the day of the Republican caucus. He has a civil suit that's different than a legal one, but still. January 29th, trial in pyramid scheme class action suit. February 6th is the Nevada Republican primary. February 27th is the Michigan Republican primary. March 4th, trial in federal January 6th case the day before March 5th, which is the Super Tuesday primaries. It continues, though. I mean, March 25th, trial in New York State criminal hush money case. May 14th, pretrial hearing in classified documents case. May 20th, trial in classified documents case. At that point, ordinarily, the who is the Republican nominee would mostly all be but decided, or the Democratic nominee, if the Democrats were having a primary, really, this year. I mean, sure, there is a primary, but no debates. As it stands, it's well, I don't want to speculate on if Joe Biden's going to be there at that point or not. But these dates are going to be happening. These trials are going to be happening simultaneously as states need to get their ballots in order, as people need to make the decision who they're going to vote for. And frankly, it makes me a little bit nervous. This may or may not be unpopular. I'm not sure. But to me, I think that, yeah, it's obvious that Trump is to blame for what happened on January 6th. I think he's definitely committed crimes here. However, this stuff should have been sorted out months ago if we were talking about removing him from the ballot. Like, we're talking about removing the most popular candidate on the Republican side of the aisle, who is also the most likely of those people to beat the current president, Joe Biden, in an election, and removing him from the ballot on some of this stuff. Again, I think if we applied the rule of law equally against all of our corrupt politicians up until this point, there might be more of a case. But like, this is pretty unprecedented. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on here, obviously. But, it gives me some pause. It gives me some pause, to say the least. We'll ultimately see what's going to happen here. But I think if he ends up being removed from the ballot in some of these states, we're going to not only see protests, but we're going to see a lot worse than that. Who knows what the next steps will be. I saw this clip floating around online, actually, from former Governor Mike Huckabee. It's just a quick clip here about what he thinks will happen. I don't even know if many people in the right wing are really paying attention to what he has to say these days, but let's go ahead and take a listen.
Do you know how political opponents to those in power are dealt with in third world dictatorships, banana republics, and communist regimes? Well, it's simple. The people in power use their police agencies to arrest their opponents for made-up crimes in an attempt to discredit them, bankrupt them, imprison them, exile them, or all of the above. And if you're not paying attention, you may not realize that Joe Biden is using exactly those tactics to make sure that Donald Trump is not his opponent in 2024. Here's the problem. If these tactics end up working to keep Trump from winning or even running in 2024, it is going to be the last American election that will be decided by ballots rather than bullets.
So I agree with some of that, but I disagree with some of that as well. I mean, first off, he mentions made-up crimes. Very likely, again, I think it's more than likely at this point that President Trump committed real crimes. So there's a big difference there, yes. But I understand the general sentiment there of what Mike Huckabee is going for, and I don't know if I want to take it all the way as far as he did, but I think if Donald Trump is removed from the ballot, it will spell a growing issue, a growing sentiment of issues with elections in the United States and using your power in politics to enforce crimes when you want to and not other times. I would like to see the same standard put against everybody, but because we haven't held Trump to the standard at this point, I don't know. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly. But, you know, again, I don't like Trump as much as the next guy, but if you really want to make sure he is not president again, I really don't think this is the move. I think if anything, that's going to get, you know, even attempting to do this is going to rally up his base even more to get out and vote for him more than they were going to before if he stays on the ballot. If you really want to defeat this guy, forget about doing that. Put up a real candidate who can beat him. Pick somebody who actually can speak to the American people, speak to the issues that are really happening and affecting everybody on a day-to-day basis, and try to improve their current situation and talk about those issues. Now, that will be a hard pill to swallow for the Democrats because right now they are all in still with Joe Biden somehow. Not sure how. We talked a lot about that last week. We're going to talk about it a little bit more today. But that's how you remove Donald Trump from this situation. You don't need to, you know, go ahead and try to have a lot, you know, pile more lawsuits onto that pile of them that are already there, right? I agree that he should be tried in a lot of these, but this is a slippery slope, I would say, in my opinion. It's okay if you disagree with me there, but that's where we're at with it. So with that, I'm going to move on here to some of the stuff that we talked about last week, actually, for a couple minutes here. Last week, we spent some time going over, well, it was the day that Mitch McConnell had his second freeze up in a period of about 5 weeks. Colin, if we have that video, let's play that video just to remind folks what that was in case you didn't see that already. And then we're going to talk about what has been kind of released since then.
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator Benny.
okay.
Somebody else have a question? Please speak up.
So again, obviously hard to watch. I prefaced this last week. It's one of those things, you hate to see elderly people not doing well in decline, but it's a whole other thing when you are a public servant who represents the millions of constituents in your state. And not only that, when in his case, he's the Senate, the leader on the Republican side. That is not okay. That is the signs, the warning signs that it is time to take a step back. Obviously, not what he's doing. We actually have a clip. Colin, I apologize. I'm going a little out of order today of McConnell downplaying the situation. He was asked about it just about an hour or two ago, actually. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
He didn't tell us what it might have been. Do you know what it is?
You've had all these evaluations. What have doctors said is the precise medical reason for those two freeze-ups?
What Dr. Monahan's report addressed was concerns people might have that some things that happened to me did happen. Well, they didn't. And there's really, I have nothing to add to that. I think you pretty well covered the subject.
What do you say to those who are calling on you to step down? Do you have any plans to retire anytime soon?
I have no announcements to make on that subject.
But what do you say to those who are...
I'm going to finish my term as leader, and I'm going to finish my Senate term. Thank you.
So obviously getting asked quite a bit about this, as he should, because the official narrative that came from the Senate doctor was literally that he was probably dehydrated. Colin, I believe we have the tweet that mentions that, the dehydration tweet. Also, it's got a comment from Rand Paul in it. I'll just read it here. There we go. So Rand Paul rejects notion that Mitch McConnell was dehydrated. Quote, I don't think that's particularly been helpful to have the Senate doctor describing it as dehydration, which I think even a non-physician seeing that probably aren't going to be really accepting of that explanation. Again, not providing people real answers to what is actually going on here. There's one last part to this that I wanted to highlight as well. A photo that kind of was floating around of Mitch McConnell a year ago versus now. There he is a year ago and versus now. And again, it's tough to see, but I mean, clearly something is happening to the man. That is a stark difference in a year. I hope that he, does the right thing here and decides to, at the least, not run again. But at most, I don't understand why so many of these people don't just take a step back, hang out with their grandkids on their front porch and drink lemonade and go to the beach and do their thing, because as these folks get older and older, the decline happens really quickly. I saw a very interesting article on this, and this is more relevant to, again, what we were talking about last week, comparing President Biden, his age, President Trump's age, and them, again, both of them would be running again. They'd be in their 80s. In Trump's case, Biden would be 86, I believe, by the end of his term. Nate Silver put together a piece that actually went into some of the statistics of how likely your cause of death might be as you get older here. Let's go ahead and read a little bit from this. Headline here, of course, Biden's age is a legitimate voter concern. There's also some great stats here that I wanted to keep in, so we'll read a little bit from this. An AP NORC poll published last week found that 77% of American adults think President Biden is too old to be effective for 4 more years. 51% of respondents said the same of Donald Trump. Biden is slightly more than 3.5 years older than Trump. He's currently 80 and would be 82 years and 2 months old on January 20th, 2025, if inaugurated for a second term. Trump is 77 now and would be 78 years and roughly 7 months old on the same day. The relatively large gap in assessments of the candidates may partly reflect tactical answers by partisan respondents. Among Democrats, roughly equal numbers say that Biden and Trump are too old. Presumably, they respond that way because it's harder to single out the other party's candidate for being too old when your guy is even older. Among Republicans, however, 89% say that Biden is too old, while only 28% say the same of Trump. However, the difference isn't entirely to be chalked up to partisanship. 74% of independents also say that Biden was too old, while just 48% said that of Trump. Obviously, some of this comes down to voter subjective views of the candidates and the way that age and health is portrayed in the media. However, I don't think voters' assessments are entirely subjective, or at least not necessarily so. The 3.6-year age difference between Biden and Trump is potentially meaningful, at least based on broad population-level statistics. Here, for instance, is a chart depicting the annual risk of death for an American non-Hispanic white male in 2019 and 2020, according to the CDC. Colin, if we're able to zoom in on this graphic at all, I'd like people to be able to see it, because this, to me, is what is kind of the big headline here. So the blue square rectangle here is what Biden's age would be if reelected, and the red is Trump's. And this other line is tracking your likelihood of just death of natural causes if at that age as an American white man, which is what both Biden and Trump are. And when you look at the end of what a Biden president would be, his chances of just dying of natural causes is literally 10%. 10% in a year. At that point, I mean, those are some high odds. You have to have you're really like looking at, okay, who is the vice president? Who are the next people in line for this position? Because when we're looking at numbers like that, and it's crazy that we even have to discuss this, that we have folks this old in politics to begin with, it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. Again, at that point, there's a higher likelihood than one would like that you're not voting for President Biden, but you're voting for whoever his vice president would be, which in this case is Kamala Harris. That's not ideal. And not to mention, this is average American, right? This is not somebody who has the most stressful job in the world, arguably the most stressful job in the world. Being president of the United States does not count anywhere on the list of easy positions. You can look at the photos of any president from the day one of their presidency to the end, and all of them look very much weathered and older afterwards. So, although, he's going to have better health care probably than most Americans, which is a whole other conversation, but definitely something that I wish I had this graph for you last week when we went into this in more detail, but I found this over the weekend and wanted to share this with all of you. With that as well, let me make sure I didn't have anything else on this here, but I think if she's ready, we'll get ready to bring in Tina here. I see a nod, so we'll bring Tina in.
I'm here.
Awesome. I saw the face in the bottom of the screen with the nod. I was like, all right, we should be good to go. Thanks so much for coming on here.
Yeah.
So I guess this morning or yesterday, I believe, an article came out in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'll read a little bit from it first here, and then I'd love to get the update and all the behind the scenes of from somebody who's been covering this a lot more closely, what's going on here, because at first glance, it looks pretty ridiculous.
It is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. Yes. I'll read a little bit from this here. So, more than 60 Atlanta Training Center activists named in RICO indictment. More than 6 activists were indicted on RICO charges last week over the ongoing efforts to halt construction of the City of Atlanta planned public safety training center in DeKalb County. The sweeping indictment filed in Fulton County is being prosecuted by the Georgia Attorney General's office. A total of 61 protesters have been charged with violating the state's Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. Some face additional charges of domestic terrorism, arson, money laundering. Most are not from Georgia. The Attorney General here is essentially saying, we're just trying to do our job. I want to read a couple. I'm going to skip down a little bit. I want to read a couple of the overt acts that are being included here.
There's some funny overt acts.
Yes. And I want to go through a couple of them in a little bit here too, but even just in the article, most of the money transfers cited in the indictment are for nominal amounts of less than $100. One defendant received $15.18 in reimbursement from Network for Strong Communities for goods to further living in the forest. The indictment says the language is repeated dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah, glue.
For folks who might not be like fully up to speed on what's going on here, can you catch everybody up?
Yeah, so obviously there's an ongoing situation in Atlanta for what they're calling the Public Safety Training Center. The activists are calling it Cop City. Right off the top, I want to mention the indictment does not even get who owns the land correct. They falsely say that the land is owned by the Police Foundation. That is absolutely not true. The Police Foundation has never owned this land. They do not own it now. What they would have if this goes through is a lease with the City of Atlanta. The land is currently in a public trust, and it's supposed to be only used as public open space for the public. Arthur Blank Foundation is overseeing that public trust, and the land itself would be owned by the city. So for them to say right off the top that the Police Foundation owns this land is just a lie. I have no idea why they would state that. But beyond that, we're seeing a lot of the same cases being brought up. So 42 of the 61 that have been indicted are already facing domestic terrorism charges. So this is just an additional layer here. I want to point out that this is state RICO charges. It is the state's attorney general that's bringing this. The DeKalb County DA came out a few months ago and said that she did not want to pursue the domestic terrorism charges that were going to be going on in her county because she didn't think there was enough evidence. I think that is the right thing to do. Many of the people that have been charged have done nothing more than exercise First Amendment rights, basically.
So the domestic terrorism charges have been removed for most of these people?
No, they've been picked up by the state. So I'm glad you're asking that. Let me clarify. So when the DeKalb County DA decided to step away from this, immediately the state's attorney general came in and said, we are still going to go forward and prosecute these cases. So the state is going forward with them, which is crazy. So in order for them to establish that there is a RICO case there, you have to have some sort of formal organization that actually exists. So basically, the state is trying to say that Defend at the Atlanta Forest is a formal organization with members. This is not true. This is a decentralized movement. Oftentimes, you'll see the indictment language contradicts itself because at one point it says, well, they don't have a regular meeting place. We don't know who's running the show, who the leadership is. They acquiesce all that. Well, that's because there is nobody running the show. This is just a decentralized movement, not a formal organization. You brought up some of the overt acts. I wanted to read some of them because it's kind of funny. One of them you were bringing up had a lot of it has to do. Let me go back. A lot of it has to do with money laundering charges that came into the bail fund. So a few months ago, we saw arrests related to that, and those folks are now being charged. In addition to having the domestic terrorism charges, they're now being charged with many counts of felony money laundering, and all of it has to do with reimbursing things for activists that, one of them was bought glue, buy glue. And
actually, Colin, I think we have a Twitter thread with some of these. Colin, do you mind opening up the Twitter thread? Yeah, we can go through some of these line by line because, it's frankly ridiculous.
It's frankly ridiculous.
Yes. Colin, do we have that Twitter thread? Perfect. So this was the part that we can skip to the next one. Tina talked about this.
There it is. I'm glad you brought that up. So right there, you see it in black and white. They're basically saying that the Atlanta Police Foundation owns the land. This is absolutely not true. And actually, there's two sections of land that are sort of being conversed now. It's not just the Cop City land adjacent. And I've talked about this on Status Coup before. The adjacent land that is being run by Ryan Millsap, Shadowbox Studios, that was a land swap deal where he gave DeKalb County land that he owned in exchange for this other land that he wanted. That has not been finalized. There is still a court order injunction against developing it because Arthur Blank Foundation is supposed to approve any land swap deals because, again, this land has been placed in the public trust. It's not owned by the police foundation. It is definitely not something that just can be handed over to a private corporation, even if it's an exchange of land. So that's still being worked out. And one of the things that came out during the initial phase of that lawsuit, the discovery phase, was that there was a previous land swap deal that had occurred, 15 years ago that Arthur Blank Foundation didn't know about. So they brought that up. You can read it in the court documents where he's like, what is this previous land swap deal that I'm just learning about now because you're doing this one? That was never okayed by me. And it's really not clear what happened with that land. It was never developed. I looked into it and I couldn't find any more details other than that. So kind of a mystery there. But, none of this stuff is cut and dry. And, one thing to keep in mind with a grand jury, they can be good or bad, right? So a grand jury, it depends on who's running the show. Is this an honest player that's actually being honest about where this case is going to go if it goes to trial? Or are they trying to push a certain narrative to get a certain outcome? A grand jury does not have a defense attorney present. There's nobody offering counter arguments to what the prosecution and their witnesses are saying. So anybody that sits on a grand jury is basically taking as fact what they're being told. So they can leave out facts if they want. And that happens quite often if somebody doesn't want to be entirely honest and wants to push a certain narrative. And obviously the state of Georgia has that narrative being pushed already. And that is that we want to build this thing. We don't care that the public doesn't support it. There's a referendum right now that's going through the system where they had to get a lot of signatures in order for it to be on the ballot in November. They exceeded that number. They have over 80,000 signatures for this referendum to be on the ballot. And let's be clear, that 80,000 is a number out of a pool of 400,000 potential voters. So that is a huge amount of people that signed this thing. Huge amount. So.
Absolutely. Here, Colin, if you don't mind pulling those back up too, we'll go through some of the specific. Oh no, you're fine. You're good. So we've got On or around November 6th, Savannah Patterson did transfer $40 to Marlon Kotz for radio communication devices and camp fuel. This is an overt act in the furtherance of the conspiracy. So that's for gas and walkie-talkies. We have on or around January 10th, Marlon Kotz and Adele McLean and Savannah Patterson transferred $27.62 in reimbursement from the Network for Strong Communities to Brooke Countersmanch. Apology for butchering the names here. For forest tools. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. We've got another one, $50 reimbursement. This is on or around January 10th. Brooke Countersmanch received $52.22. This one was for Forest Kitchen Food. Obviously, that is an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. We'll do another one here because the next one's too good. This one, on or about August 9th, Emily Murphy received $11.91 in reimbursement. Yep. For glue. That, man, $11 for glue absolutely constitutes racketeering charges, right? I mean...
It's crazy, but I guess what they're trying to do, and again, they're very insular in making this happen, and I don't know that anybody is tapping on this from the outside and saying, hey, maybe this is a weak case, right? But clearly they're trying to say, Defend Atlanta Forest is a formal organization. The money arm is over here doing the money laundering. They're giving money to these paid activists that are camping out in the forest. These paid activists are engaging in acts of arson, are trying to break into buildings, are torching construction equipment. When the reality is the vast majority of the people that they arrested did nothing more than exercise First Amendment rights. They bring up a group that was arrested a few months back for handing out leaflets. The leaflets were about a Georgia State trooper that was involved with the killing of Manuel Tortuguita in the forest. So they might not like what those leaflets say, but that is still 100% protected free speech in this country. So to say that that's an act of domestic terrorism and now part of the RICO charges, part of this racketeering that's happening. Where's the profit motive here? One of the things that generally you want to see in a solid RICO case is that there's some sort of profit motive. That doesn't exist here either. I wanted to bring up one other glaring thing that I think is important as well. They list as the start date of this movement, Defend the Atlanta Forest movement, as being the death of George Floyd. This is not true, but in their mind, it benefits their case, right? Because all of that civil unrest that happened in 2020 in regards to not only George Floyd, but, other individuals that were killed by the police, including in Atlanta, all of that movement and that protestation that happened during that time period, they're trying to associate with the Defend Atlanta Forest because they want to say that these guys are very much against law enforcement, ACAB, the whole 9 yards, because they think that paints a certain picture for your average jury member in the state of Georgia. But this is just not the case. The movement started well into 2021. So to say that the start of this was the death of George Floyd is ridiculous, but that's what they're doing there as well. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I'm curious. So at this point, obviously this is one piece to what's been going on here. These guys and gals have been fighting, for a while now and been thrown all sorts of curveballs like this. What has kind of, I don't know if you've spoken with anybody recently here, but what is the general sentiment amongst the organizers right now? What are kind of some of the moves that are happening behind the scenes that people are trying to rally behind?
No, that's a good question. I think the opposite is happening as to what the state wants to have happen. The state thinks that by sort of trying to chill First Amendment, I think they know that their case isn't that solid. I think they realize that the domestic charges, terrorism charges are really weak, probably not going to stick in most cases, if not all of them. I think they're aware of that. I don't think that's the end game. The end game for the state is to chill the First Amendment rights, right? To chill the protest movement, to get these guys quieted down enough and afraid enough that they stop protesting, right? They're trying to get the referendum thrown out now. They're trying to say the signatures are not validated and using other legal means so that this doesn't make it onto the ballot in November, because I think they're afraid that it will pass. And from what I'm seeing, it probably will. So that will be the end of Cop City. They won't be able to build it. So having said
that would be the implications. That would be the implications of the ballot measure, though. So if it's on the ballot, it's a vote, like a yes or a no vote, essentially, on do we want our money going towards this? Okay, wow.
Right. Do we want the lease? Do we want the lease to happen with the police foundation? So most of what's happening though behind the scenes, to answer your question, is they're getting fired up. They're angrier. These egregious charges, because they're so overwrought. Like they're just not in reality. There are ways to make RICO charges. This is not one of them. This is a bad case. You know, trying to criminalize First Amendment rights is a really dangerous precedent. They're now going to have, I guarantee this, you're now going to have every frickin' First Amendment law organization, ACLU down in Atlanta now to defend these charges, because it's that serious and it's that egregious. And I think most of the on the ground activists that I have absolutely remained in touch with, they're angry about this. This has just galvanized them more. It's not going to stop them from coming out and protesting. They're not afraid of the state. They know that these charges are egregious. They might be willing to get arrested to fight for their cause because they think it's that serious and that important. And I think it's beyond not just having the public safety center, Cop City, built at this point. It's now, gotten to be a bigger conversation about what protest means in this country, what protected free speech means in this country.
No, absolutely. Colin, I'm putting you on the spot here. I know I asked, do we have any highlights from Tina's reporting in Atlanta? Because you've actually been there covering some of these protests, covering some of these other events. And that, I always say this, but that's what sets Status Coup apart up and above from everybody else. Right. Is sure, we can sit here, in our offices or whatever and talk about this stuff, but we actually go on the ground to go cover these important stories. Tina's been to Atlanta twice at this point, I believe. Yes, I'm sure there's more plans coming. I've been covering East Palestine, Ohio since February. I've been 4 times at this point. Jordan's been on the ground in Flint, in Kalamazoo, so many other places. Yeah. So if you're able to support this kind of reporting and actually going out and being able to be like, oh, this update on Cop City is happening, let's have Tina on, who's been there twice, to come talk about it. Tina obviously does her show every week as well. If you're able to support that type of reporting, statuscoup.com/join for literally as low as $5 to $10 a month is a big help to be able to do so. Colin, I think we do have that clip right there. If we don't want to, we can take a look at some of Tina's reporting from Atlanta.
Tina-Desiree Berg with Status Coup News, reporting for Breaking Points. What the city of Atlanta and police are calling a public safety training center, activists have dubbed Cop City. The neighborhood where Cop City is slated to be built is an unincorporated part of DeKalb County, and it is mainly a poor black neighborhood. For 3 years, protesters have camped in the Weehilani Forest, where the location is. And in January, the Georgia police killed one of those protesters while trying to sweep the protesters from the park. Police claim the protesters shot at them first, but an independent autopsy showed that Manuel Terán, affectionately known as Tortuguita, had 57 gunshot wounds and was seated with their hands up when shot. The city of Atlanta and the police have slowly been escalating their aggression towards the protest movement. They have arrested several activists that are being charged as domestic terrorists, even though they have done nothing more than utilize their First Amendment rights. And this week, they arrested an elder activist who was peacefully protesting outside of one of Cop City's funders, Home Depot.
Criminal trespass on Home Depot property, now you're under arrest. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
this is free political speech.
Yes, I did.
No, you did
I said
not.
Home Depot did not want y'all here.
We will leave if y'all want us to.
I did not get told anything of the sort, or else I wouldn't be doing this, ma'am. I did not get told anything like that.
This is free political speech.
Wouldn't be doing that if I had been told that, ma'am.
Come on.
We're having our free speech request.
Then that's fine, but I told you Home Depot did not want the property.
Right in front of you.
Stop Cop City.
I was not told this. You hear me?
Yes, I did tell you that.
No, you didn't, ma'am. I did not hear a thing.
Why is she being arrested?
Did she go inside the store? She did. She said
it's
she
a
did
store.
No, and I understand that it's a store, but Home Depot corporate is here, and they did not want anybody protesting in the store. When they start reading out
Wait, can we stop it there for a second?
Yeah.
Thanks, Colin. I just want to point something out here that when we were standing there watching this happen, and this police officer was saying that, I was like, do you not hear yourself, and do you not understand that you 100% sort of validating the point that the Cop City protesters are trying to make, which is that the police foundation is pretty much run by the donors that donate to the police foundation. Home Depot is one of the biggest donators to the police foundation. Obviously, they support the building of Cop City. So, and there was a guy there that day from corporate. He walked up to me and he's like, I'm here to handle the press. And I'm like, you guys just arrested grandma. There's no coming back from this. I have no idea what to possibly say right now that's going to make the PR nightmare that you just created for yourself go away. But he didn't want to talk to me on camera. But it's interesting to me. The reason I want to stop and point this out is it's interesting to me to see how insular these folks are. They don't see any issue with what they're saying right there. And as bad as other police departments can be in making mistakes across the country, I think in most instances, what you would normally see in this kind of a situation is the officer approaching her and saying, hey, Home Depot doesn't want you on their private property doing this right now, even though you're in the parking lot. Maybe you can just move over to this section of the parking lot over here and that'll be fine. That didn't happen. They just cuffed her and dragged her through the parking lot because Home Depot asked them to.
Right. Yeah.
It's crazy.
No, it is very ridiculous. And that was some good added context. And it's like, oh, the people who are literally paying for the police foundation asking the police to go get rid of these people is not a good look. Not a good look at all. Let's watch a little bit more of it, and then we'll talk a little bit more afterwards.
And exit the premises. At that time, I also issued them a criminal trespass warning, telling them that Home Depot did not want their business or them inside the store.
Were other people
inside the store?
This is not an interview. I told you the basis of what you need to know. The rest of it you can read in the police report.
She spent the night in jail and was released on a $1,500 bail bond, and she's being now charged with criminal trespassing. But one of the things that the Home Depot rep told us that day was that they wanted the police to arrest these individuals and they didn't want them on the property, which sort of plays into the narrative. The following day, we saw something similar at Cadence Bank. There were some bank individuals with the bank outside with a very large police present. And when I lied down on the stairs to film part of the protest, they told me that I was even going to be arrested if I touched the stairs anymore, and that it was private property and that would be criminal trespassing per Cadence Bank. Late in the hours.
All right, Colin. We won't play the whole thing for folks who want to see that whole video. I believe it's. I'm not sure if that's also on Status Coup, but that whole video is on either Status Coup or Breaking Point's channel. Yeah, and you know what, Tina? I remember at one point, I think it was on the trip you and Colin were there, and there was the protest that got, there was a police car on fire at one point. There was one line that you said at one point, and I was cutting some shorts to go on YouTube and TikTok or whatever, and it was Tina and Colin there, and she was like, oh, I heard some loud bangs over there. Like, let's go that way, and like running right towards it. So if you appreciate Tina getting out there and putting herself on the line to go get that sort of coverage.
People are running in the other direction. I'm like, let's go.
Tina's running towards the fire. So smash the like button for that. Leave a super chat. Become a member for Tina, always running right towards the danger there. Jeez.
Somebody has to do it.
It's something. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess anything else you want to share as far as things coming up on the Cop City coverage? Or, yeah.
I'm actually going to be interviewing one of the kids that is being charged with domestic terrorism in probably next week or the week after. So we'll probably release that as a premiere here on Status Coup. But I've spoken with his attorney a few times, I'm not to give out any deals, but I got a good background on what's going on here. And I think it's important for folks to hear directly from the individuals facing these charges because they're very serious. This individual has been under house arrest with an ankle bracelet on all these months for basically doing nothing more than exercising First Amendment rights. Absolutely did nothing more than that. But this is how the state is using this sort of guilt by association argument to loop in these folks to try to just, in my opinion, it's just to chill the protest. There's no other valid reason to do this. Well, that's not even a valid reason.
Yeah. be
It's the only
careful who you buy
logical
glue
reason.
for.
Right.
Be careful who you buy glue for, because you could go down for racketeering soon.
It's insane.
So
yeah.
it is insane. That's terrible. Tina, thanks so much for taking the time to come on. I am going to start to wrap things up. If you want to stick around for super chats and whatnot, you're welcome to. If not, all right, we got a couple here. So first off, I saw we had a $100 donation.
Wow.
From Leslie on statuscoup.com/donate. So Leslie, thank you. We appreciate that. We have a couple other super chats here. Das Bosch Fleisch, 249 euros. Want to defeat Trump? Cut off his Diet Coke supply. Not a bad idea. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Maybe Joe Biden will ban Diet Coke and he'll make it impossible for Trump to get it. I don't know. Thanks for the super chat, Das Bosch Fleisch. We appreciate it. Fly Chomper Fly, $5. Totally agree. So glad you see laws not been applied evenly. Republicans see this encourages conspiracy theories as well as pushback, aka more Trump support. That was on, we talked a little bit about the Trump is having ballot access lawsuit just brought up today in Colorado. Right. They're trying to keep him off the ballot. I'm curious what you think about it, actually. So I prefaced it, I was like, maybe this is a bad take, but I almost think it's, at this stage of the game, a little scary to remove him from the ballot in some of these states.
I agree with
because
you.
It's,
I don't think he should be. That's just an affront to democracy.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because that's kind of, yeah.
My bigger concern is, why is it okay? So, not to get off on a tangent, but if Trump gets convicted, goes to jail, why is it not in our laws anywhere that you can't run from office if you're a criminal? That seems kind of weird to me. I don't know.
Agreed.
That would be a more valid, to me, that would be a more valid concern. No, I don't think anybody should have ballot access removed. And in fact, it really irks me when they go after Green Party and other third party individuals on the same regards. I want to strengthen our democracy. And strengthening democracy means allowing people you disagree with to also run for office.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was like. I dislike Trump as much as the next guy. However, if you really want to beat him, just put up a candidate who actually speaks to the American people and can understand the lived experience of what people are going through and offers real solutions.
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath for that to happen necessarily, but there's that. We've got another super chat here from Ariana Negron, $10. This super chat is dedicated to everyone that talks in the chat, homies. Thank you to all those. Thank you, Ariana. And yeah, we appreciate you all in the chat. Last week, I tried to do a little bit of asking some questions and getting a bunch of one-word answers from folks, and that was fun. So I do try to keep an eye on the chat. No, there was a fun poll. Well, because it's hard to read them if you got like long.
No, it's hard to keep track of
some specific questions.
I got you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tina, thanks so much for joining us. Everybody who is joined on the show today as well, thank you all so much for watching. We'll have another live stream tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Tina's got her show on Friday as well. Does that come out at 5 as well?
Yes, 5 as well. This week, one of the things we'll be looking at is the sentencing on the Proud Boys organization. This is actually an organization. They have bylaws. You have to go through an initiation to get to different tiers. Like, somebody needs to explain this to the Georgia folks. This is what an organization likes. This is what a decentralized movement looks like. And here's the thing. Within a decentralized movement, there might be individuals that do commit crimes, but trying to make this argument that you can hold everybody associated with that movement to account for what one individual does is absolutely asinine and scary and crazy. It's just, that's just not how it works.
Absolutely. And actually, I want to say this before we leave here. Humorous from the chat just gifted 5 Status Coup News memberships. 5 memberships right there. Humorous, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. And I believe for the 5 people who just got memberships, they are like randomly assigned. So maybe you're watching right now and you just got a membership. So keep an eye out for that. Cool. With that, again, if you want to become a member, statuscoup.com/join is the best way to do so, to enable Tina to get back to Atlanta, to enable me to continue to cover in East Palestine and other places across the country, wherever, frankly, bad shit is going on that the rest of the media chooses to ignore. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a nice night.